close attention today, as it tends to be a day with high volatility, considering that the Fed is meeting today. Today we have the Federal Reserve meeting where Jerome Powell will talk about what they will do with interest rates, whether they will raise them, lower them, or keep them stable. We all know that the most likely scenario is that they will remain stable. In fact, here on this page, where we always check, the probability at this moment that rates will remain stable is 99.9%. But why do I say it's going to be a day with high volatility if there won't be any change in the interest rate? It's very simple. We all know that when Jerome Powell speaks, panic rises. Jerome Powell is the chairman of the Federal Reserve, for those of you who don't know. And he usually gives a bit of a forecast, about what might happen between now and the next meeting or the upcoming meetings, right? So if Jerome Powell says that in the upcoming meetings, interest rates will be lowered, that could move the market positively, even if he doesn't lower them right now. If Jerome Powell says that, well, they're probably not going to lower or raise interest rates for the rest of the year, the market might react negatively. Or if he says that interest rates are going to be raised, the market might also take it badly. Obviously, we're not counting on these kinds of scenarios, right? We're not considering a scenario where interest rates keep rising. On the contrary, we're expecting them to either stay the same or go down. So today, we have to pay very close attention to what's happening in the market, especially from 8:30 in the evening Spanish time, which is when Jerome Powell's meeting will start, where he'll be talking about all of this. So pay close attention today, because it could be a day that offers plenty of entry opportunities in the market, and possibly, depending on what happens in today's meeting, we might see Bitcoin finally break through this resistance level at $110,000, which we've been consolidating around for almost 40-something days. In fact, let's be precise, it's been 41 days. We've been consolidating at the upper part of the channel for 41 days. This is a very good sign, considering that we haven't seen a sharp rebound. In other words, we've approached the 110,000 mark. It's true that we've corrected down to around 105,000 more or less, but it stayed in that area. It's not like other times when we've hit 110,000 and then corrected quickly. We've dropped to 100,000, 90,000, or even the last sharp correction we had when we went down to 75,000. Those were quite sharp corrections, as we can see. This time, though, it went up to test the upper part of the channel, and we see that it's holding in that area, which is definitely a good sign. A good sign. Why? A good sign, obviously, because Bitcoin is showing quite a bit of strength and a desire to break out of that pattern. For now, it's holding here, putting pressure on the 50-period moving average, which is this red line here. It's trying to break through the 20-period moving average, which it already broke above previously, but then dropped back down over the last few days. As soon as it breaks through the 20-period moving average and the resistance at $110,000, we could possibly see Bitcoin finally making a move toward the $120,000 zone in the coming weeks or months. In fact, if we look here at the options contracts, we can see that right now the bets on where Bitcoin's price will go in the next few months are, the highest is at 140,000. In other words, right now, most investors are betting that Bitcoin will be closer to $140,000 in the coming months. The second bet is at 115,000, the third bet at 120,000, and the fourth bet at 110,000. We're seeing that all these bets, the four main bets, are all above the current price. The fourth one could be said to be practically the current price, right? That resistance we've been talking about, which is about to break at 110,000, but the first three are betting on prices higher than the current price we have. So this gives us a certain perspective, right? To be able to open positions, keeping in mind that the highest probability is that the price of Bitcoin will be above the current price. And for someone who likes trading, likes to operate in spot, or simply likes to invest in cryptocurrencies, this gives them certain opportunities to say, hey, look, right now, Bitcoin is at $105,000. I might be interested in investing in Bitcoin at 105,000, considering that maybe it could go up to 120,000 in the coming weeks. So let's see if this happens, what kind of return we would be getting. Right now, if we invest in Bitcoin at 105,000 and Bitcoin goes up to 120,000, that's an increase of about 15% in spot. But a 15% gain is not bad at all, considering that we might see 120,000 in the next 3 months, the rest of June, July, and August. In these 3 months, we might possibly see Bitcoin at 120,000. Earning 15% in spot is very good. But if you do the same trade in futures, leverage at 10 times, which I personally never leverage more than 10 times, 10 is always my maximum. Then we're not talking about 15% anymore, but 150%, 10 times more. So basically right now, if I invest, let's say, only $1,000 in Bitcoin, leverage 10 times in a long position, meaning betting on the price going up. And if it reaches $120,000 in the next few weeks or months, I would be making more than double. In other words, I would be making $2,500. I would get back my initial 1,000 investment and make a profit of 1,500. And I would be more than doubling my investment with a single long position. These are swing trading operations, which you already know I like to do. All these kinds of trades. And obviously when paired with a good strategy and solid risk management, as you know, you can have access to them. You can find them in the Ohana Trading Club VIP. You can find it down below in the description. It's our trading club that has been running for more than 2.5 years, where you have a professional trader with you every day, giving live classes, sharing all their signals, all their analysis, and it's completely free. In other words, it's a 100% free trading club for all of you. So what are you waiting for? It's already been 2.5 years running very successfully. There are hundreds of students inside, and of course, it's all free after all. Knowledge has no limits, and anything you can get for free is always welcome. So here in the video description, you have the link to join. Hopefully you have the VIP club. It's very simple. You just register on Bitget, which is our trusted exchange where we carry out all these kinds of operations. Registering on Bitget is also free, spoiler. And also, with the link you have here in the description, you get a 10% discount on all fees, plus over $8,500 in trading bonuses, which are bonuses the exchange gives you basically free money, so to speak, to help you start trading and take your first steps on the exchange. In other words, you can start trading with basically no risk since they're giving you money, right? So to speak. So what are you waiting for? Take advantage, register on Bitget, join the trading club and start practicing, because honestly, there are plenty of opportunities coming up in the marketons we've been taking advantage of for a while now, plus all those still to come. Because also moving on to altcoins, shifting from Bitcoin to altcoins, remember that we're at a consolidation point in Ethereum. Right now we're looking at Ethereum on the daily chart. Here we see the 200 period moving average, this green line, which as I mentioned in previous videos is being respected very well. You can see here how Ethereum keeps touching it. It doesn't move away. It's right here touching it, moving around, but it's pressing up against it, really clinging to the 200 period moving average in order to break through it. As soon as it breaks through the 200 period moving average, we're going to see a sharp rise in Ethereum up to the $4,000 zone. And in the $4,000 zone, you already know what happens, right? I mean, we've already seen it happen 3 times in the past year and a half. On 3 occasions, we've seen that what has happened when Ethereum has reached the $4,000 zone or made this move toward the $4,000 zone. We've seen the rest of the altcoins wake up. The rest of the altcoins reach higher prices. We've seen Cardano at $1.30. We've seen Polkadot at $12. We've seen Avalanche at $50, $60. We've really seen interesting moves in the altcoins, which right now, what happens if you look at Cardano and find it at 60 cents? A clear support zone. What do we see? Well, damn, it could be a good area to open a solid long position and try to take advantage of the rise in case Ethereum reaches 4,000, because we know that Cardano can easily go to between $1.20 and $1.30, which is something it has already done before with the same kind of move. Here, we would be looking at a spot appreciation of practically 100%, meaning we could double our money in spot. But if we do it with leverage, that is, if we open a long position with 10 times leverage, we're not talking about 100% anymore, we're talking about 1,000%. It's multiplying our investment by 10. In other words, for every $1,000, we would be making $10,000 in profit, which is crazy. But as you've already seen here on this channel, it's the fastest way to make money, obviously with all the risks that come with it, right? Like I said, I never give you investment advice, I just share what I do, and obviously I use good risk management with these kinds of strategies. That is, I open at a support level, we're at yearly lows, and I protect myself with a 50% hedge. In other words, for me to get liquidated on a position leveraged 10 times, for example, if I open Cardano at 60 cents, it would have to drop to 30 cents. That is, it's something unlikely, not impossible, but unlikely. So I'm pretty well protected. It's actually more likely that Cardano will reach a $1.30 again than that it will drop back to 30 cents. The same thing happens with Polkadot and with other cryptocurrencies. Right now, we have Polkadot here at historic lows, clear support area, so it's a very good zone to open longs. In fact, you all know here that I have my longs open in Polkadot, which are in this area. All of them are open in this area, so the risk we have is zero, in other words. Practically every time it has dropped. We've only been in the negative for a very short time because the drops are from 3.9 to 3.7 or 3.5. In other words, these are really insignificant drops and very well protected, because for us to get liquidated, Polkadot would have to go down to $1.09 or so, that is 1.09, and right now we're at 3.7, and yet the growth potential up to $12, which is the price we've already seen twice in the past year to year and a half. When Polkadot makes this move, as soon as Ethereum goes to 4,000, gives us a pretty significant upside where we will be opening a long position. If we do this in spot, that's a 200% gain. In other words, we practically triple our investment in spot by making this move. If we do this in futures with 10 times leverage, it's no longer a 200% gain, it's 2,000%. In other words, we're multiplying our investment by 20. That means for every $1,000, we would be making $20,000, which is just insane. As you know, these are the kinds of trades we like to make because they're truly profitable. And the risk we're taking at this point, considering we're at historic lows, isn't very high. In other words, it's quite unlikely that this will keep falling and crashing hard, considering that we're at the lows, we're in a bull market, and alt season hasn't even started yet. So the highest probability is that this will keep going up, obviously, always keeping in mind the risks involved. But as I was saying, in the case of these type of trades in altcoins, we have positions that have been open for a year and 2 months, or even a year and 3 months, which you've seen here on the channel, and most of them are public. In other words, these are trades that we've been holding on to over time. It's true that it's been slow to take off because the alt season still hasn't started. Bitcoin has indeed gone up to $110,000. Altcoins, on the other hand, haven't taken off yet. But as soon as Ethereum starts to gain momentum, we're going to see a strong move in altcoins that will bring us a lot of profit. In the end, I told you, didn't I? Like, in recent years, the winning horse has been Bitcoin, the one we've bet on, the one we've made money with, the one we've multiplied by 100 live here in Bitcoin. And we've multiplied by 100 in Solana as well. That is, we've made trades here publicly with you all every day, where you've seen how we turned $850 into $85,000. In other words, multiplying by 100 in a single long on Bitcoin, leverage 10 times over a period of 1 year and 10 months. Yes, 1 year and 10 months, but damn, in a year and 10 months, multiplying your investment by 100 is insane. And we're really happy to be able to show it to you, not so much when we win as when we lose. Showing it here, but in the end, I've already shown you the trick, which is to win much more than you lose. If you win more than you lose, like, what does it matter if you lose by a factor of 2, if you've already won by a factor of 100, right? I mean, in the end, mathematically speaking, it's just a few bucks. That is, you've lost a few bucks to win a fortune. And right now, I think that when it comes to large amounts, big gains in the short term, that is taking advantage of what's left of the bull cycle, the opportunities are in altcoins, in those altcoins that really have several years of experience of development, that have a good blockchain, that have adoption, that are in the process of launching an ETF, because they're going to launch an ETF for Solana, an ETF for Cardano, an ETF for Ripple, an ETF for Polkadot, an ETF for Avalanche. All of these are ETFs that are pending release. In other words, we're not talking about some shitcoin that institutions don't want. No, we're talking about coins that institutions do want and that are in the process of getting ETFs and that, well, are going to deliver very good results in the coming month as soon as the altcoin market wakes up thanks to Ethereum. Which, on the other hand, speaking of Ethereum, things that help it wake up are its ETFs. We've already seen here how in recent weeks there have been major inflows into the Ethereum ETF, something we hadn't seen since basically almost a year ago when they first launched. For example, we saw here on June 11th when $240 million flowed into the Ethereum ETF, while on that same day only $133 million went into the Bitcoin ETF. In other words, almost twice as much went into the Ethereum ETF as into the Bitcoin ETF, which hadn't happened before, right? And for now, this is a sign that the market is trying to turn around, is trying to kick off a new season. On the other hand, something that really catches my attention is the dominance. We see that Ethereum currently has a dominance of 9.4%. That is, its dominance has dropped significantly compared to previous cycles. And yet Bitcoin's dominance has increased a lot, up to 64%. When a drop in Bitcoin's dominance is expected, is usually anticipated to fall to at least 55%. In other words, a drop in Bitcoin's dominance from 64 to 55% would translate into a significant increase in Ethereum's dominance, from 9.4 possibly up to 12 or 15%. And the rest will go to the altcoins, which is what we call an alt season. That is, in the end, it's liquidity moving from Bitcoin to the rest of the altcoins. And that's what will really give us a good rally, a first alt season, right? Or perhaps the only alt season in this cycle. But obviously, as soon as this happens, which by the way has happened every year, right? In the end, we have to be aware that even though this cycle is dragging on a bit longer, the fact that there's an alt season there has always been an alt season in every cycle. There has always come a time when Ethereum starts to rise and the rest of the altcoins follow. That moment has always arrived. And from the institutional side, we see that there continues to be interest in the rest of the altcoins. It's not like you can just say it's only about Bitcoin. No, because if that were the case, they wouldn't have launched an Ethereum ETF, which has already been active for almost a year. They wouldn't be launching the Solana ETF, the Cardano ETF, the Polkadot ETF. They wouldn't be bringing out these kinds of ETFs if there weren't institutional interest in the rest of the altcoins. So in the end, it's a matter of patience. I've said this many times, haven't I? On many occasions, I've reminded you of some important phrases, right? As patience pays. Warren Buffett always used to say this: the money of the impatient ends up in the hands of the patient. All the people who are desperate right now saying, oh, only Bitcoin is going up, the rest of the altcoins aren't going to rise. Obviously, most altcoins are going to die off because there are so many, there are millions right now, but the important ones, the main ones, should go up. And those of us who are more patient are the ones who will see the results. In the end, I don't know, if you have 5 altcoins, I'm just making up 5 altcoins, you say, look, I have Ethereum, I have, Solana, Polkadot, Cardano, and Ripple or Avalanche. Well, you know that they're probably going to go up, or maybe out of those 5, 4 will go up and 1 won't. But it doesn't matter to you, like even if only 1 goes up, it doesn't matter to you. You know that the other 4 are going to rise, and what you earn from those 4 will more than make up for the one that didn't go up. In the end, nobody here is a fortune teller, and nobody gets everything right? But what's clear is that patient people will end up seeing results. In the case of altcoins, I'm very sure about that. In the case of altcoins, once this cycle ends, which hasn't finished yet, and I think will end around the end of this year, like October, November, December, in that last quarter, I think we'll be at the highest peak. And before that happens, before this cycle comes to an end, we're going to see an alt season. And that alt season is what's going to give us profits in spot, in all the altcoins we hold in spot, profits in DeFi, in all the altcoins that are in liquidity pools, and profits from leveraged longs in futures. That's what's going to yield the most, right? In comparison, what you can earn in futures is much more, it's 10 times more than what you make in spot or in DeFi. You earn much more in futures. And when that happens, when we see that first alt season, that explosion, and we start to see the liquidity and realize we're approaching the end of the cycle, that's when you sell everything, take your liquidity, and start investing in other things. You start investing in other things, and as we're emphasizing here, real estate is a big topic. Buying properties, building assets, because that will always bring you benefits. The bull market, the bear market, the sideways market, that's a money ball that always works. Just like the traditional market or the cryptocurrency market, it also goes through cycles, right? That is to say, there are years when the market is going down all year long. And in those times, all you can do is keep buying more as it drops, keep positioning yourself so that when the more bullish years come, everything you've been sowing during the downturns, you can reap during the upswings that follow. But that's a process that takes more years, right? There are ups and downs in the market, and you take advantage of them. However, if you've taken advantage of these ups and downs in the stock market and made money, and you invest that money in properties, buying, renovating, selling, buying, renovating, selling, buying, renting, you can do that all year round. It's a recurring income that you keep generating, and it's work. Plus, you're also keeping yourself busy working on something that's truly yours. It's your business, your investment, your retirement. In this kind of venture, there are no bosses, no schedules, nothing like that. It all depends on you, on how much time you want to dedicate, on how creative you are, on how you develop yourself in this field, right? But really, thanks to what you can earn in the cryptocurrency sector, you can then start in the real estate sector in a much more aggressive and much stronger way, right? I mean, it's not the same for someone who has to start from scratch with 10,000 euros saved up as it is for someone who already starts with a base of 500,000 or 100,000 or a million, that is to say, it's very different. I mean, if you've made €1,000,000 or dollars in cryptocurrencies and then you want to get into real estate, obviously it's much easier because you can say, all right, where do we start? That is, instead of buying one property for 100,000, I buy 5 properties for 100,000 each. I start with 5 at once, boom. And I still have another 500,000 left for renovations, for little fixes, to invest in other things. But you're already starting big. You're starting, boom, 5 at a time. You don't have to go slower anymore, right? Now you can start with a strong business right from the beginning, having 5 properties at once, buying them all at the same time, renovating them. Maybe you'll sell one sooner, another one later. Maybe you keep one and rent it out, but the business has already started off strong from the very beginning. And that kind of opportunity is something that the cryptocurrency sector can offer you right now. Because if you make the most of the cycle, do things right, study, educate yourself, and seize the opportunities, the money you make is an advantage. But David, it's really hard to multiply your money by 100. Okay, yes, it's hard to multiply by 100. And the later you get in, the harder it will be to multiply by 100 because the market keeps moving forward. As you've seen, it keeps developing. But right now, I still see it as very easy in the crypto world, still very easy to multiply by 10 with altcoins in what's left of this cycle. Because as you've seen here with the examples I've given you, with any of these coins, if they just go up a little to prices they've already reached this year, you can already get a 10-fold or even 20-fold return. I've shown you here with Cardano, just from the current price to the price it reached a few months ago, that's already a 10-fold increase. And with futures leveraged 10 times, with Polkadot, that's a 20-fold increase. So in other words, a 10-fold return is possible. If you're someone who says, damn, the maximum I can invest is €1,000, at most $1,000. Well, listen, 1,000 times 10, that's 10,000. At least you've already saved up 10,000. You say, well, I've made some progress, That's already 10,000 as a base to start doing things, to start investing, I don't know, in the S&P 500, in Bitcoin by doing DCA, or even as a small base to start with some real estate by taking out a mortgage, right? If you do it with more, then obviously it's more. But the opportunity to build up a savings nest egg big enough to get started in the real estate world, let's say $30,000 is relatively easy to achieve in the world of cryptocurrencies, especially in this year we're in, because not every year is the same. That is, you have to understand that not every year in the cryptocurrency market is the same. There are years when you won't earn anything and you lose. During crypto winter, you won't make any gains. On the contrary, you'll be losing money and you'll just be there planting seeds. In a sideways market, you won't make any gains either. At best, you'll just be bored for an entire year doing DCA, buying cheap, but you won't see any results. A recovery year, like the previous year has been, that's when we do see a recovery, right? We start to see how everything we've been planting begins to move out of losses and then into the positive. And then there's the year like the one we're in right now, which is the bull run year, the bullish year of these cycles, where anything you've planted well gives you quick returns. But you know that each time this period gets shorter. We're already halfway through the year, halfway through 2025. And as I'm telling you, I estimate that the end of the cycle will come at the end of this year. That is, at most you have 6 months left, at most. It could be less, it could end in November or October. I'm leaning more towards November, December, But anyway, it's 6 months. 6 months in which I see it as relatively easy if the market goes as it should, and everything points to yes, to make yourself a little pile of money, to be able to say, hey, look, I don't know, with €2,000, I've managed to make 20,000, or with €3,000, I've managed to make 30,000. And hey, then once you finish the cycle with €3,000, you've made 30,000 in this cycle by opening some good longs on certain altcoins that you really believe are going to go up. And maybe a bit more as well, even if you don't make as much right now with Bitcoin. and you say, hey, look, I've finished the cycle. I invested 3,000 euros in cryptocurrencies. I've ended the cycle with 30,000 euros. But hey, David told me about a strategy where with 30,000 euros or dollars, I can already start dipping my toes into real estate by buying a small rundown apartment for 50,000 euros or dollars or 60,000 euros or dollars, and using those 30,000 as the down payment to help offset the mortgage a bit, to pay my taxes, to do a small renovation, and from there, well, get everything started. But in the end, it's about shaking off your laziness and getting started. Everything starts the same way, by taking the first step. The first step, which is often the hardest part many times, what people struggle with the most, is taking that first step. You say, damn, I have an idea. I like to do this. I like to do that. But you keep putting it off. And in the end, there comes a moment when you say, damn, years have gone by and I haven't done anything. And then you start seeing people who have done it and you say, damn, what this person did, I had already thought of that a long time ago. Sure, but the thing is, you didn't do it, and that other person has something you don't have, which is that they had the guts, they took that first step. And that first step is what each of you needs to learn to take. Sometimes you feel afraid. And it's normal to be afraid living in the society we live in, right? Especially in Spanish-speaking countries, which are, well, corrupted mainly by socialism or by a kind of financial education based on pessimism, on make yourself poor, on the best you can hope for is a salary, on work for someone else because you're not capable of doing it yourself, where we're limited from a young age, right? In our education, they already limit us so that we don't aspire to something great. And those limitations are what we have to get out of our heads. We have to take our minds and say, why can't I be a multimillionaire? Why can't I own 100 properties? Why can't I live in a house that I like? Why can't I travel whenever I want, whatever I want, and with whomever I want? Why? Who is telling you that? Some stereotypes that are ingrained in society today, in your country. No, you're the one who decides that. You have to be able to get rid of those limitations, to say, I have no limits. As long as I'm alive and my heart keeps beating, I have no limits. I can go wherever the hell I want with no one holding me back. And if there's someone who limits you, if there's someone who holds you back, if there's someone who clips your wings, remove them from your life. And go fly as high as you can, because in the end there comes a time when we're all going to die. There will come a time for all of us when we reach the highest point and will fall, whether it's through death, illness, or whatever it may be. And the point is to try, while we still have energy, while we're alive, while we're healthy, to climb as high as we can, because in the end, problems always come. And if the time comes when, I don't know, because of life circumstances you die, have an accident, an illness, or whatever, and you no longer have the ability to keep growing, you'll wish you had done things right when you had the energy to do so. That's when the regrets come. Or you die, and maybe you're dead and you think, damn man, I could have left something for my kids, my family, a legacy, But look, I kicked the bucket and left them hanging. Just imagine that, right? The regret a person feels after dying. And if there's something beyond death, being there with the remorse of saying, damn, I left my family in trouble, I left my family with debts. I left my family without resources. I left my kids who still had to grow up, to develop. And while I was with them, I didn't do things right. However, being able to die and say, well, I'm dying, but I've left them a good future, a good life, like they can go on without me. That's something that used to really, really obsess me, especially when I had a daughter. I have a daughter, she's already 9, a little over 9 now, so she's got a few years under her belt. And for me, as she was growing up, when she was born and as she grew, I was really obsessed with the thought, damn, what if I die? What if I die and she's left stranded? What if I die and, I don't know, she doesn't have a way to support herself, or she goes from having a good life to having a really bad one? What if I can give her a good future because, I don't know, life doesn't go well for me? I mean, these are things that worry you, but for example, I use them as fuel, as strength, as energy to push myself to the top, And to this day, I'm still doing it. Like, I keep fighting and working hard, because she's 9 years old, she still has years ahead of her before she's an adult, and she depends on me. And for now, well, I try to give her a good education, pay for a good school, instill good values, and teach her that she shouldn't have any limits, teach her that she should aim for the highest. I tell my daughter, I say, look, sweetie, I tell her, your grandfather got this far, your father got this far. I say, and I want you to go even further, always aiming higher. With every generation that passes, you have to go further. Because if not, if we all just get this far and get stuck, and no one gives the next generation a push to keep growing, we stagnate and become obsolete. So you always have to go further and further and further and further. And so that one day when you die, you can say, all right, I'm dying, but I've given my daughter a good education, I've left her a good inheritance, and I've given her the tools to build her own life. And I think that's a very beautiful aspiration that each and every one of you, if you have children, should have. And if you don't have children, but someday you want to, then think about that, right? Think about this. What am I going to leave my children? Am I going to leave them wealth, or am I going to leave them hardship? So work hard, take advantage of the opportunities in the market, take advantage of your ideas, develop them, strengthen them, And above all, if you see that they are truly viable, take the first step and overcome fear, because in the end, on the other side of fear lies all the good things in life. Don't forget this phrase. Everything good in life is found behind fear. When you overcome that barrier of fear, everything good is on the other side. Everything you wanted is behind the fear, but you have to overcome it. So with that, I say goodbye. If you like the video, I'd appreciate it if you give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. A hug, and see you next time.